Okay, welcome to Short Sales Explained. The whole reason we did this class is because with the market changing the way it is, anyone who purchased in the last 4 years cannot sell for what their house is worth. So even looking online and on the MLS, there are more and more houses that are being listed as short sales. So we need to understand what the process is, not just for a buyer side, but also when someone calls us and says, hey, I need to list my house, but and it's not worth what they paid for it. A lot of times we're telling people, well, you'll just have to put it in management. But sometimes we have people who can't afford 2 mortgage payments, can't afford to take a loss, because even in the world of property management, just like home prices have gone down, rental prices are dropping, and they're continuing to do so. So we're going to have more and more sellers and more owners being in this predicament of, how do I get out from under this house? And really their only way to do that is to short sale. Short sale is one step prior to foreclosure. And so, and it's got a lot of tricks to it. So it's not like, and honestly, short sale is a misnomer, because people think, oh, short sale, I can buy it faster. But no, it means you're short on funds to sell the house. So, and it's actually a longer process. And we're going to kind of talk about what that process is. And I'm kind of going to go through this like I would go through it with a seller, because they're the ones who really need to understand everything. But then I'll talk about how it goes with the buyers too. Now, first of all, I'm going to start with this. It is very important. I just made this mistake on the short sale that we had on Phoenix Drive, and it is very important for you to get their last mortgage statement. The reason for that is you need to see what their current balance due is. Another agent with Coldwell Banker, I'm talking with her to try to help her clients with a short sale. And when she asked, I told them, I was like, you need to ask for their mortgage statement. All of a sudden, she gets this mortgage statement and they're $9,000 behind. That means they've already missed multiple payments. And when they start this short sale process, it is going to flag them for foreclosure. That is what just happened on Phoenix Drive. Phoenix Drive, I did not ask. I asked him personally. Like I said, hey, are you behind on your payments? And he said no. And I took that as their word, because in a short sale, you have to be behind 1 month. Okay, so payments are due on the 1st, they're late by the 15th. On the 16th, they can go ahead and file for the short sale. They can request the information from their bank. But if they're multiple months behind, then that is going to signal to the bank that they need to start foreclosure. So, when you're talking to your sellers, so that's the first part. You need to get a copy of their most recent mortgage statement, because you need to know where we're at in the process. So when we're talking with sellers about short sales, we need to figure out the right. Is it going in and out? Okay. So I can see it kind of on the screen when it does that. So when you're talking to your sellers, I'm going to go back. Step one is to assess if this is the right thing for them. And what you have to do is ask them questions. One, you have to know what is their next step? What is their plan once this house sells? Because if they say, well, I'm going to buy a house in my next duty station or whatever, you can't be behind on your mortgage payment and buy another house for a year. If you miss one mortgage payment or if you're late on one mortgage payment, then you can't buy something else for a year. So if that's their game plan, then you need to know that and you need to tell them that. Because in order to start a short sale, you have to show that you are experiencing a financial hardship. That means you can't afford your house. So sellers need to understand it doesn't matter if you're going foreclosure or if you're going short sale, we are about to affect your credit. And then they need to make that decision. If they are someone who has exceptional credit, then they've got to figure something else out. Now, in no way am I a proponent for short sales. I mean, for subject twos. I hate subject twos. However, if your client says to you, I don't want a foreclosure, I don't want to miss a payment, but I can't afford my payments, you need to breach that subject with them about subject twos. But you need to be able to explain them. And if you don't know how to explain subject twos, on the Always Hear Properties YouTube channel, there are 2 videos about subject twos. One in which I voice very strongly how much I hate them, but I do explain why. Okay. But those are the 2 factors that you have to assess if a short sale is right for them. Figuring out what their next game is, like what their next step is, and then they have to have a financial hardship, which in lender world means that they have missed a payment. Then the second thing is you have to collect all the necessary documents. Now, this is not something that we collect, but we have to get with our sellers and let them know these are the things you need to have for your lender's short sale. So once they have said that they've got this financial hardship and once they've missed a payment, they're going to need to contact their lending institution. And every single one is different. A lot of them, though, pretty much all of them will say, we will send you a short sale packet. They need to tell them, I am already working with a real estate agent, and give them our information. Because that lender normally, there's always exceptions, but normally that lender will send the real estate agent a packet that we have to do. One of the things that is going to be in that packet that the seller has to do is they're going to have a hardship letter. This is a letter that they have to write that explains why they can't afford this house anymore. They're going to have to show proof of income, tax returns, things like that. And a lot of times when a lender sees this, they are going to try to get them to do something else. Like they're going to try to get them to do what's called a loan modification, which is basically refinancing their loan, or they're going to try to get them to do a loan modification where they'll take like 4 months of payments and say, okay, you're not going to have to make a house payment for 4 months, and we are going to add that to the end of the loan. Okay, so they're going to try that because the lender is going to try to do whatever they can to not go into short sale. Okay, because they don't want to do that. Plus, if they do a loan modification, either form, the lender makes more money. So they like that. So they'll need their hardship letter, they'll need their proof of income, they're going to need a mortgage statement, which is funny to me that they have to have a mortgage statement when they're talking to the mortgage company. I'm thinking they should have that information, but whatever. Then what they're going to also have to provide, and this is something that sometimes they ask the listing agent, but sometimes they ask the buyer. In our Phoenix case, they asked the buyer for the next couple of information, but in the case that we're dealing with now in Cove on settlement, they've asked the listing agent for it. So it just depends on your lender on who they ask information from. But the seller will have to provide a signed copy of the listing agreement. And in that listing agreement, there has to be a reference to it being a short sale, whether it's in like special provisions or somewhere. They have to make a representation of the listing agreement, of the short sale. And then the other thing is the lender is going to send them an authorization form. And this authorization form basically allows the lender to talk to the real estate agent on their behalf. So, and when a lender reaches out to you as the listing agent, when the lender reaches out, they're going to ask you for your CMA. They want to see not just how did you get to that price? Okay, because when it's a short sale, it's not like a foreclosure. It has to be at market value. So you have to be able to prove how you priced that property, and did you price that property according to market value? So you're going to have to show them, here are at least 3 comps that are sold. They want them sold as most recent as possible. So really within 90 days, if you can. The closer you can get to the house, that's, basically they want to see that this is an exact representation of what the market is doing. The other thing they're going to want to see is not just the 3 sold. They're going to want to see what the competition is and how the competition is priced. And then they're going to ask you for pictures. And they're going to want to see the front of the house, back of the house, sides of the house, the interior. And sometimes they'll ask you a question that says, what about this property will not make it sell within so many days? So when I did this one for the Phoenix house, I told them we have Tiffany blue cabinets. Nobody wants freaking Tiffany blue cabinets in their kitchen. It had a black room. Those were things that were deterrents from selling the house. So they're going to want to know those kind of things. They do not expect the seller to fix any of that, but they are just like, hey, what about this house is not going to bring market value? Okay. So, having those documents already in place before they ever get with am I back? I'm back now. Okay. Getting those documents in place before they ever contact their lender would be key. Okay. So the next thing is they are going to they're going to send all this information back to their lender because they've contacted the lender to get information, and they call it a short sale packet. And then they're going to give that short sale packet back to their lender. And there's going to be another form that is a specific form that they will get that initiates the short sale process. It is very important that the seller understands that this is stuff that happens. Life happens to people. So they should not feel like a failure. They should not feel any kind of way because they need to trust you. So you need to reassure them as much as possible that this is just something that happens and that we're there for them to talk to us through the situation. Because the lender is going to talk to them more than they talk to us, even with that authorization. Now, once they have decided to do the short sale and they have submitted their packet back to the lender is going to review everything, and you can have the house on the market this whole time. Okay. So don't wait to put the house on the market to get lender pre-approval. Okay. So once they send this packet back, then the lender is going to review everything, and then they're going to send them a notice that says, okay, your short sale has been approved. Sometimes the lender will send an appraiser out there. If the lender sends an appraiser out there, that's a red flag that they're getting ready for foreclosure. Okay, so if your seller says, hey, I got contacted by by an appraiser, just know you don't tell them that, but just know for yourself that we're short on time because that means they're getting ready. And that usually means that they've not been as honest with you about payment history because let's say last year they were 3 months behind and then they caught up with their income tax return, for example. Okay. And now they're 3 months behind again, or now they're a month behind again. That 3 month period from last year could still trigger a foreclosure. So if you get that, just know, like if they call you and say, hey, an appraiser is coming out to the house, just kind of know that's in the lender's mindset that they're going to get ready for it because they have a history of not making payments. Okay. Like I said, you're going to already have the house listed for sale. Okay. Because you need as much time on the market as possible. Once the lender gives you pre-approval, then you're going to go back into your listing and say, pre-approval for short sale has been received. People need to know that because then it makes it instead of it being a longer process, it's a shorter process. When we list something that is a short sale, we need to put that in the MLS listing. You can put it in public remarks, you can put it in private remarks. If you put it in public remarks, make sure on that 1412, that seller's authorization to disclose, that they have given you permission to do that. But once you get pre-approval from the lender, then you're going to go back into the MLS and put pre-approval or bank pre-approval has been received. And the reason I keep saying pre-approval is a lender will not approve a short sale until you get a contract. Okay. So you have to get a contract on it for it to be approved. But they will say the pre-approval is basically saying, yes, this property meets these requirements, or this seller meets the requirements for a short sale. Once the house is listed for sale and once you get a contract, okay, the contract itself from the buyer has what's called a short sale addendum. And that short sale addendum, so a buyer's agent who is putting in a contract must provide this short sale addendum. This is not something that the listing agent can provide to them. Okay, it is a complete buyer contract piece. But if you get a contract that does not have that short sale addendum to it, you'll need to tell the buyer's agent, hey, I need this short sale addendum. Just like y'all are learning about short sales addendums, short sales were not an issue for the past 5 years. The last short sale I did prior to this year was in 2019, right before COVID. So people who have come into real estate in the past 5 years don't have experience with short sales because they haven't done it. It's still really early in the game. So just, always practice grace and kindness and just say, hey, you didn't include this short sale addendum. Can you please send it to me? On the buyer side, what that short sale addendum says is within so many days, if I don't receive, and it's a negotiable amount of days, but in so many days, I don't receive approval from the bank, then the contract can be terminated and all earnest money returned to the buyer. Okay. So, and remember also, short sales are not short. It makes it a little shorter when you get the pre-approval from the bank. But if you don't have that pre-approval yet and you get a contract, you are looking at least at a 45 to 60 to 90-day close. So it can be a long time. Most lenders try to stick with that 60-day mark, but it's at least a 60-day close. If you have the pre-approval and it's a responsive bank, then you can get it a lot quicker, but not sooner than 45 days. Okay, that's going to be the thing. Once the seller has agreed to the contract, okay, so seller agrees to the contract, it's got the short sale addendum that says the bank has to approve it. It is an executed contract. So they execute the contract and they send it to the lender. The whole contract package. The whole contract package is everything, third-party financing, non-realty items, anything that goes with that, your disclosures, everything. They have to have that complete contract package. The lender they'll then contact you as the real estate agent and say, hey, I need a new market analysis. Like, okay, I just did one for you like 2 weeks ago, but I'll get you another. Even if it's the same information, they will want a new market analysis. Now, here's where it gets fun. So so even though you have an executed contract, this addendum requires the bank's approval, right? The bank can come back and counter on that contract, which that's what I don't like. But the bank can come back and counter the contract. The bank can come back and say, we don't agree to pay $12,000 in closing costs, or we don't agree to a home warranty, or we don't agree to this. At that point, you then have to do an amendment to the contract and say, okay, this is what they will or will not do. So then that is for the bank, for the buyer to then decide if they want to accept the new terms or not. If they do not accept the new terms, then it is terminated. They get their earnest money back. So a buyer is completely protected throughout the entire transaction, short sale transaction. So they'll still have an option period for repairs. The buyer will still have all of that kind of stuff. The seller can still make repairs if they want. But a buyer is completely protected if the bank doesn't agree to any of the terms of the executed contract. Okay? And sometimes you have to negotiate with the lender. So sometimes you have to go back to that lender and be like, look, they've got to have this closing costs. If you look at the market analysis that I sent you, every house is getting $10,000 in closing costs or whatever, you have to go back to them. But when you're negotiating with the lender, you have to go back to them with facts. It can't just be, they really need this house and they really like it. And, single mom or single dad and 95 kids. And, lenders could care less. For them, it's about the bottom line. So, yeah. Now, once you get lender approval, everything moves forward. And it's just like a regular closing. Okay. The seller will make no money, but he will not have to bring any money to closing. On the closing disclosure, it'll be zeroed out for the seller. So when you get that ALTA statement right before closing and you're checking it and you're like, how's it not bringing money? You're going to see a line item on there from the bank that they're basically crediting the seller. And so it's a zeroed out settlement statement for the seller side. The title company handles pretty much everything, just like in a regular transaction, from the time you have an executed contract to closing. They are going to work with the lender. The seller's lender, they'll work with the buyer's lender, they'll work with everybody because there's a lot of information that has to come forward. Now for your seller, after the short sale happens, they are going to need to understand some things. Their credit is going to take a hit. It's going to take a hit not just for the missed payment or payments. It is going to take a hit because it will say on them that they have had a short sale. Because basically in a short sale, it's you have cost a company money or you have cost the guarantor of the loan money. So that's a huge impact. And we're going to talk about the guarantors of the loans in just a second. They also need to understand that they need to talk to a CPA because there will be tax implications for the short sale. Because basically, the lender or the guarantor has given the seller money to settle their debt. So the IRS counts that as income. So they will need to talk with the CPA, see how that is going to affect their taxes. That is not for us to answer. We don't know their tax situation, but they just need to be advised. You need to talk to somebody. And that's only if the lender forgives the balance. The lender does not have to forgive the balance that they fronted to the seller. They could use that as a collections debt. It depends on who the guarantor is. So, But most lenders I've seen forgive debt and use it as a charge off, but it's still then on your credit as a charge off. So let's talk about the guarantors. Okay. When you have somebody who has a VA loan, okay, and this is something you're going to need to know from the very beginning, what type of loan did they get? If they had a VA loan, then the VA has guaranteed the loan. That's all that means. A VA loan is just a guaranteed loan by the VA. When you are working up pricing and things like that, the VA guarantees 33 to 36% of a loan. It depends on if they're a first time or a second time VA user. So the amount of discharge, like the amount of what they owe, which is different from the amount of what we can sell it for, has to be within that 33% range. When I am figuring this up for a seller, I capped mine for VA at 30%. So when I'm figuring it up, okay? And the reason I do that is one, I don't really know their whole situation. And I know we probably will not get an offer at asking price. So I need to know what that lender is going to be able to recapture from VA. Now, if the lender recaptures that 33% from the guarantor, which is VA, then there is nothing to charge off. Then there is no deficiency left on the account because the guarantor has paid the lender that amount. So the lender is essentially not out any money. Now, for your VA buyers, what that means is when they do a short sale, they cannot use any remaining eligibility on their VA for at least 2 years. Depending on how much of a percentage that they used on the short sale, depends on if it's longer than that. But the minimum amount of time is 2 years, which is kind of, but now conventional loans, if you have somebody who foreclose or who goes short sale on a conventional loan, it will be a deficiency and a debt to the seller because there is no, unless you put down less than 20%, you don't have mortgage insurance. And on a conventional loan, you only have mortgage insurance until it stops. So, for example, on my house, I bought my house 5% down, and I have a conventional loan, bought it 5% down. So, conventional loan, until you hit your 20% equity mark, you have to pay mortgage insurance. So, that's usually 7 years. They figure at 7 years, then you should be good. But so if I would have needed a short sale prior to the 7 years, then that mortgage insurance that I had, that's what it is. They're my guarantor against foreclosure. FHA, you have mortgage insurance for the life of the loan because they think FHA people are a high risk. That's fine. Let them think that. I don't care. But that guarantor, so FHA is a lot like VA, except for they don't have a percentage because they are paying for the life of the loan every month. So it's very important that you know, especially on VA, what they're oh, okay, bad. Okay. So if you go outside that 30% mark on a VA, it is highly likely it will not be approved. Conventionals, if you are outside of the mortgage insurance, they will probably just go into foreclosure. But you never know. So what, and it was whatever. But anyway, the short sale process can offer a very valuable solution to your seller. And a lot of times sellers don't even know it exists, which is why a lot of times, like the Phoenix people, they didn't tell us that they were months behind on their payment because I don't think they wanted to seem stupid. But they were months behind because immediately when we did not have a contract within 3 days, they went into foreclosure. So, and if they wouldn't have been months, if they would have followed exactly what I had told them from the very beginning, then if we wouldn't have gone into foreclosure, I'm like making a mess. They wouldn't have gone into foreclosure. I hit my trash can, just jumped in. So, it's very important that you have honest conversations with any of the sellers who are facing these. Sometimes sellers do not want to tell you what their payoff is. You need it. If they give you any indication that they're in financial trouble, you're going to need it. One thing that you can do to kind of have information beforehand, before you meet with them, and I always say meet in person because it's harder to lie to somebody's face. But before you meet with them, know what they bought it for. Go into the MLS and see what they bought it for before you meet with them. Because then you can already know that you need to have that short sale conversation. If they bought it for $255 and I can only sell it for $235, then those are conversations you already need to have. So, let's see. Anything else? Let's see, anything else? Let me look at my notes. If you do find that you want to learn more about short sale and foreclosures, there is a designation that's called SFR. And so you can take the foreclosure class. It's called Short Sales and Foreclosures. And REO. REO just means relocation. No, I don't remember what it means, but it stands for distressed properties. Okay, so properties that are distressed. So if you are interested in doing more or specializing, if you want to market to people, definitely look at doing your SFR designation because that is very helpful because it teaches you the process. It teaches you how to have conversations, teaches you the rules about everything. So yeah. So I know we have them. So y'all, Amanda and Kayla are here. Again, do y'all have any questions or anything, things that have come up?
It's like, what is the? Okay, go ahead after. When can we list?
Yeah, when can we list it? Once, like, I know obviously they're gonna tell you in the beginning, like, I missed a payment, you're gonna know it's a short sale. At what point can you list it?
You can list it as soon as you get that listing agreement signed. If you
Okay.
meet with them day one and they say, hey, I've missed a payment, I'm going to be doing the short sale, or you talk to them about the short sale, they're calling you to list their house. And the longer we have it on the market, the better off it is. If we know that it's going to be a short sale, right? Whether bank approved or not, if we know it's going to be, then we can list it and we can tell if, even if we get a contract before the bank has ever come back with a pre-approval, we can list it, we can get a contract, and we can say, you need to put in a short sale addendum because we are
Okay.
selling it for less than what it's worth. It is a longer process that way, but that's okay. Short sales are not short processes.
That's what this has to do with this law.
Yeah, so, but as soon as you can, I would list it.
What was your other question?
I have a couple. So let's say the bank is not approving, does not forgive like the remaining balance or whatnot. What happens for the seller after that? Obviously, they still have to pay it. Do they still pay is it like a car?
Well, kinda. So, they're not gonna send them a bill. They're gonna send them collection notices, and it's gonna be for the entire amount. Now, this is not gonna be for anyone who has a guarantor. Okay, but it's gonna be especially for conventional loans. Those are the ones that are gonna see the deficiency on their, I mean, everybody's gonna see the deficiency on their credit. But the conventional loans are the ones that can go to collections to capture that amount.
And that's because we didn't have the mortgage insurance.
After that period.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's because they didn't have the mortgage insurance. And one of the weird things about mortgage insurance is a lot of people who did conventional loans prior to COVID, when
Mhm.
home values substantially increased, a lot of people, like, I'll just tell me, because me and all my neighbors are the same way. I paid mortgage insurance. I bought my house in 2018. I paid mortgage insurance 2018, 2019, 2020. In 2020, at the very end of 2020, my home value, like what I could sell it for, because the market was so crazy, was stupid high. So I petitioned, I sent a letter to my lender and I said, I request a reevaluation of my property based on what it's worth. And so now I have more than 20% equity because they said my property was worth $690,000 and I bought it for $325,000. And so I now had all that equity to make up the difference. So a lot of people who bought their property prior to the COVID craziness, they did that. So they have their 20% equity. And so even though the market has come back down and there is no way I could sell my property for that amount, like minus $200,000, I still don't have to go back and pay mortgage insurance.
Mhm.
So, so if I were to become, if financial issues or, life happens, then I would be one of those people that if I'm short sailing, then it would be on my account. Like it would be on my credit that I have this amount that I owe this lender until they charge it off. So, and then it's still on there, even with the charge off.
Did you have?
No,
Okay.
that mine was just that one, and then I just remembered that she had already. I already knew what she was talking about.
So let's say you get your mortgage statement from your seller and obviously it doesn't match what they actually told you. How should that conversation go?
So, like, are you saying, like, they told you,
Honest.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not-
like your exit with Phoenix, like if you had gotten that statement before, what would you have said?
Yeah.
How would you have tackled that?
so it's so funny that you asked that. So that's exactly what I've been talking with this Caldwell Banker agent about, because she listed the property based on this verbal of this is how much I owe, right? And uh, so He was off by about 15, or he was off by $9,000 of what he owed on his mortgage. And so she didn't find out until she asked for the statement a few months later. So that conversation that she's having to have with them is basically, I don't know how to fix it. If you are that far behind and we do a short sale, just know it will trigger a foreclosure. And you just have to tell the seller the biggest thing about real estate in general is everything comes from a place of facts. Okay. So when you're talking to this person, first of all, they're already upset because they're losing this house that they have an emotional connection with. But you can't sugarcoat things for them. And that was one of the biggest lessons I have learned in real estate when I first got started. Because when I tried to sugarcoat things, it came back and bit me in the butt. Because then they're mad at me. That's why I always do worst case scenario. So when someone comes to me and then I get this statement and I'm like, okay, seller, this changes the entire situation. Because now, instead of you being 1 month behind, which we thought you were to go into short sale, you're now 4 months behind, which at 120 days, foreclosure can start. So I said, we're now 4 months behind, and I don't know how to help you. We can try to continue with this short sale, but I need you to know and to let me know the minute you get your foreclosure notice. Because I need to know when that happens. Because if you are 4 months behind, which is what your statement says, we're going into foreclosure.
Okay.
And it's just literally that simple. Because we can't, when people get into so much financial trouble, we can't stop that process. It's not like we can get an injunction against going into foreclosure. It's not, once that starts, it started.
Snowball going downhill.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But this is what you can tell them. We can keep it listed. Even if the foreclosure process has started, if miraculously we get a contract, the bank can stop the foreclosure process. They can. But it has to, I have to send them. Now, before COVID, I have had banks that stopped the foreclosure. I have had banks that did not. So it really is a gamble, and it really just depends. And that's what you tell the seller. It's like, we'll try this. We'll try to send them the contract. We'll try to get them to approve it. But sometimes they don't. Which is crazy to me because I'm like, foreclosures are expensive for a company. Because then they have holding costs. So when a house gets foreclosed on, it gets assigned to an REO company. And that REO company basically takes ownership of the house or takes possession of the house and does everything they can to market it for sale. And it never comes back to market lower than what it was. Because now all foreclosures, they're trying to sell them at market value. Instead of, back in 2007, 8, all the way to 14, foreclosures were a deal. Every investor wanted a foreclosure because they were a deal. Now they're not so much anymore because these REO companies fix them up and then sell them at market value. So,
Well, gotta make their money.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions I had.
So did y'all find that this was a valuable thing? or did
Yes, excellent class. Yes,
Because I
excellent.
wanted
I
the
really enjoyed
MSR
that. It was good.
designation.
y'all- Good. Because that's what I'm wanting to find out. Like, if I do these little Zooms, if they're going to be, valuable to y'all. Because I can do them on all kind of topics. I
Right.
think.
Not only that, if you're posting these on YouTube, it's also valuable to other people. You may draw other people into it because this is
Yeah.
really good. I mean, you're an amazing instructor, and your classes are great. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, they're really, really good. So
Oh,
I enjoyed it.
And I actually had like questions like
Yeah.
to participate in. Like you mentioned things, I was like, oh. And
Yeah.
then when most of the classes when I'm sitting in them, I'm not oh.
Yeah. It was really good. I really enjoyed it.
all right, good. Well, that's it. I'm going to stop the recording and then close it out. Thank
Thank
y'all for coming to
you.
learn.